Uh, Very good afternoon to one and all here. I'm Murli Jagannathan. I work for National Institute of Construction Management and Research in India. I'm presenting this paper which is co-authored by Professor Ravindranath Chaudhary, Dr. Venkatesan, Dr. Sobha Ramalingam. Before we start, this paper is actually presently a conceptual one. We are still in the process of validating the concepts what we have identified here. It has largely evolved out of a discussion within a small group, which is consisting of a mixture of a few academicians and something from the industry. Of course, it needs a further research, and this is only a conceptual paper which we are trying to present it here right now. To start with, like before I start my presentation, I just want to bring you to the context. I just want to give you some examples as to why we need to identify enablers for sustainable lean construction in India. So, a few years ago, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, whenever we used to go to any shopping market or any kind of a mall for any kind of purchases in India, whether it's a small purchase or whether it is a large purchase, we used to always get a carry bag or a polythene bag to carry our things back to our home. There was a lot of debate on this because it was considered to be, because this polythene bags or those carry bags which are made up of this, the materials which are not supposed to be biodegradable so easily, the government tried a lot to put a pressure on the common people and also the owners of the malls to reduce the use of these non-biodegradable substances. But of course, it didn't yield any big result, and people were using it because mainly it was comfortable for them to carry these bags home after they finished their purchase. Later, to curb this practice, the government brought in a rule that these bags need to be charged to the customers. Whether it is a rupee or a 2 rupees or 5 rupees, 10 rupees, it has to be charged if they want the bags, or they have to get their own bags when they finish their shopping. When this practice was brought in, there was a tremendous decrease in the use of plastic bags, in the use of these polythene bags. The thing what I'm trying to say here is that whenever you associate a price tag to something, whether it is a small amount or whether it's a big amount, immediately the consciousness, or we start thinking whether it's really worth it to spend that money. Whether it can be a 1 rupee or 2 rupee, but people started to use their own they started to make their own arrangement instead of, they got something like cloth bags or something like that to the shopping mall to get the, to make their purchases. So now, if we have to bring in the culture of working in a sustainable manner, it is difficult because of two things. One thing is that if we want our practices to be sustainable, we'll have to move out from our comfort zone. And it's difficult for us to move out from our comfort zone, number one. And second thing, there is a common understanding, I don't know, even in the today's discussion in the plenary session, as a reaction to Christine's presentation, there were some comments that if you have to get in sustainability, do we have to really spend that extra buck? So is there a cost associated with sustainability that has to be spent in order to bring in sustainability? So these two, that is moving out of our comfort zone and the cost tag associated to bring in the sustainable practices, is probably something like a hindrance for us to bring in sustainability in our daily lives. That's what is an understanding. So for doing that, for moving out of this and making our actions or making our processes sustainable, we need certain enablers, and that is what we have done in the context of construction in India. So moving ahead, right, now you might ask me a question, what am I doing here in a lean construction conference? So we believe, as a team, we believe that lean construction is the biggest enabler of sustainable construction, or to bring in sustainable practices in the construction industries, especially in India. Now, lean and sustainable construction, there's an enormous interest among researchers. And in the context or while I compare sustainability with lean, we believe that sustainability is of a greater need and there is an urgency in bringing out sustainability. I'll tell you why when we go to the next slide. Then there is a top management support that lean construction has, which I believe sustainability is not having that much. And the moment you have a top management support of any organization to implement any practice, it becomes easier for the organization to implement it. And therefore, since there are so many hindrances to bring in sustainability, the practices, the assumptions what we have about sustainability is probably preventing the top management from implementing sustainability from the very roots of the organization. Right. Now, lean, on the other hand, is pretty successful compared to that of sustainable practices, introducing sustainable practices in an organization, because lean always comes with a added advantage to say that you're going to save money in terms of time, you're going to save money in terms of cost. But on the other hand, sustainability, you say you have to spend that extra money to bring in sustainability. And probably that is where the problem is whether the sustainability loses the management, the top management support. Now, and we are just posing certain questions here. Number one, is lean construction receiving the much needed top management support? I made a statement, but I just have to prove that. We made a literature review, and we found that in the last year's ILCC presentation itself, that was conducted in India, that is Indian Lean Construction Conference, in that presentation itself, there were many papers which were from the industry, and the CEOs and the CFOs of the organizations were presenting their success stories on implementation of Lean and what was their, what are the outcomes that they have got as a result of deploying Lean practices in their organizations. Companies like Godrej Construction, L&T Construction, Tata Projects demonstrated that Lean made a difference in their organizations. Now, this shows that there is a pretty good support of the top management when it comes to implementation of Lean practices. There are so many things about it, like whether it is really successful or whether it is showing results in all projects is debatable, but there is a support. We can see a visible support and commitment by the top management in making our projects Lean. That's number one. Second thing, I said there is an urgency to bring in sustainable practices in our country, in India. Now, how do I establish this need? How do I establish this urgency? The thing is, now for doing this, we'll have to move out from the traditional view of triple bottom line to further increased dimensions. Like we make use of the 6-dimensional framework by Piercy and Rich, and this 6-dimensional framework we add to that one more dimension to understand where all we need to think of sustainable practices. They are like, to start with, in the Indian context, first of all is environment. We need to have a sustainable environment, and I need not discuss about this much. Then workforce. It said that there are 38 fatal accidents per day in Indian construction projects, which is a really huge amount. So it's not sustainable in that way. Secondly, and the third dimension is on supply chain. Are our supply chains sustainable? The question, I raise this question because there's a Planning Commission report of Government of India that says that over 95% of construction enterprises are employing less than 200 persons. Which means the construction enterprise is highly fragmented. The moment it is highly fragmented, the question of the practices that are involved there comes into picture. I'll talk about this a little more in the next one. Then the community. How far are we affecting the community as construction organizations? How far are we creating an impact on the community? To see that, so to ensure that we do not have an adverse effect on the community, the government again came up with a law telling that any organization that is having more than a certain profit amount, say which is around 5 crore net profits over 1,000 crore turnover, they are supposed to involve 3% of their profits towards corporate social responsibility activities. That was a rule that was brought in by the government. But if we start looking at how many organizations are having a turnover of 1,000 crores, there are very few. So does it mean, and again, to supplement this, I quote the Planning Commission report, which is that 95% of construction organizations are employing less than 200 persons. So they don't come under the ambit of this compulsory 3% contribution or towards corporate social responsibility because their turnover is not to the extent of 1,000 crores. Now it's only a very small set of construction organizations that are concentrating on this very one-sixth of the dimensions of the one-sixth of the sustainability framework. Like, and to this list, we are adding another dimension that we talk about. In this paper, we talk about the contractual sustainability, because the moment the contracts are not sustainable and the projects get extended and gets delayed in terms of time or cost, everything else is affected. And we believe that the contractual sustainability is the mother of all sustainability requirements, because the moment my project extends from 1 year to 2 years, all other associated non-sustainable practices get extended. Right. Now, having said that, there is an urgency, there is a need in bringing and making our construction sustainable. We are just trying to see the role of lean construction, which already has the top management support in bringing about sustainable practices. So we are trying to make use of the comfort of the lean construction with the top management in bringing out sustainable practices. And to our advantage, we have a lot of papers in the literature that say that lean and sustainable are something which cannot be separated and which is something complementing each other, right? So when we did the analysis, we saw that though they are supporting and helping each other, lean and sustainable, and in fact, it was told in the morning that sustainability is a requirement, lean is a delivery method, which is a very, very valid point, right? Now, if we have to get this sustainable lean construction practices get going, if we want to get this going, then we'll have to think about certain enablers. So what are these enablers? Right. So designability and constructability, government policy, owner commitment, long-term partnership, high market penetration, and compatibility with existing contractual frameworks. These are certain enablers, at least in the Indian conditions. We're not talking about we're not generalizing it towards entire construction enterprise, but at least in the Indian condition, we find these are largely important enablers to get the sustainable lean construction in practice. And what we have done in our paper, which you can see, is each of these enablers we have taken and how it affects the 6 or 7-dimensional framework, 6+1 dimension framework, in terms of both lean and sustainability. We have tabulated that. And of course, now we are in the process of validating our understanding and finally coming to a concrete result. Now, to sum it up, this is what we are trying to say here. You have this lean construction whose urgency factor in comparison with sustainability is low, but its attractiveness is high, therefore it reaches the top management. On the other hand, sustainable construction is urgency factor is high, but attractiveness in comparison with the lean practices or the lean results is low, and hence it fails to reach get the support of the top management. But when we combine this, under sustainable lean construction, it becomes both urgency factor high, attractiveness is also high, and therefore it reaches top management support. And this happens with the help of enablers, which we have identified here. So this is what we wanted to explain, and we are still working on that, and we expect our results to be validated, and probably we'll be presenting it in the next conference in 2019 at Ireland. Thank you very much.